You know, to give her credit, as much as I disagree with Phyllis Schlafly about feminism and the communist conspiracy and it's all the left, blah, 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 blah. And I don't mean to minimize her worldview. It's real. It's coherent. I just disagree with it. And I don't think that America is going to go back to the 1950s, where the only reason that a woman would go to college is to find a husband, and or the main reason, and where we have ads in the newspaper that are segregated into men wanted and women wanted sections. And I mean, it's a different world. And beyond it being a different world, it's a better world. Women were purposely kept in second-class status, as were African Americans, as were Hispanics, as were racial minorities, and women aren't even a gender minority. They outnumber men by about 1% in the United States. But power-wise, they're still hugely a minority. So I disagree with her on that. But the two things that she keeps coming back to, and it's one of the main reasons I want to keep bringing her on this program, and I hope conservatives get this, is that she is one of the preeminent conservative voices. Phyllis Schlafly has been speaking the conservative line and a major influence in the conservative movement since the 50s, I believe, maybe the 60s. And she says, number one, our Supreme Court is totally out of control and needs to be reined in. She wrote an entire book about it called The Supremacists, saying the Supreme Court is acting in ways that are absolutely unconstitutional. And I completely agree with her on that, number one. And number two, that the destruction of the American middle class, in large part, is the result of free trade agreements. And I absolutely agree with her on that. In fact, I opened my book, Rebooting the American Dream, with that in the first chapter. Not Phyllis Schlafly, but, my own, actually Alexander Hamilton's take on it. The middle class in China right now, which when the month that I lived in China to study acupuncture, I lived in Beijing in November of 1986, 86, that, at that time, there was no middle class in China. Or everybody was the working poor. Or I don't know how to describe it. The middle class was very different than today. I mean, I stood on that main street, I forget the name of the street, in front of Tiananmen Square. There's a giant, 6 lanes on both sides, 12-lane highway or thereabouts. And it was just an ocean of bicycles, and maybe once every 5 or 10 minutes a car would come along. And it was always a black limousine with a government official in it. But now, and the tallest building in Beijing was the Sheraton, and it was 10 stories, as I recall. It was a very poor country. And so we took our manufacturing jobs, which had built the American middle class and made us the richest country in the world with the strongest middle class in the history of the planet. We took those jobs and we gave companies permission to move them to China by changing our trade laws and changing our tariffs, doing away with our tariffs, so-called free trade. And the result is that the middle class of China now is larger than the entire population of the United States. I mean, that's astonishing. And our middle class is half of what it used to be. And I would say it's actually, I'd say, the official, more or less official numbers are, as a percentage of our population, about half. When you consider wealth, when you consider what people have been able to save or how in debt they are. And I'd say it's probably 10% of what it was when Reagan came into office. Because, as Elizabeth Warren pointed out last week, since Reagan came to office, since 1980, while wages have gone up, there has been new income, or not wages, compensation has gone up. 100% of it has been captured by the top 10%, the majority of it going to the top 1%. But the top 10% have taken all of it. And the bottom 90% in America, since Reagan came into office and we entered this 34-year era of Reaganomics, the bottom 90% in America have seen their wages either flat, stagnate, or decrease substantially. If you look at it at the level of the household, it's been relatively flat. If you look at it at the level of the individual, it has gone down dramatically. And as Phil Schlafly said, in large part because of our insane trade policies, which leads us to SHAFTA, the Southern Hemisphere Asian Free Trade Agreement. SHAFTA it is being pushed not just by Republicans, although they're the most enthusiastic about it, but it's being pushed by our president as well. They call it the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. And it's time to stop SHAFTA. Now, I mean, it's interesting. I constantly say, we need to go back to before 1980. In other words, we need to roll back Reaganomics. We need to raise taxes on the very, very rich back up to 74%, top marginal tax rate. They don't pay that on the first $1 million they make. They pay that on the money after that, right? They pay a whole lot less. And they pay the same thing you or I pay. And, the first $10,000 you pay nothing on. The second $20,000 you pay 2 or 3, whatever it may be. But we need to roll back Reaganomics. But I'm saying do that to bring back the middle class. I am not saying do that to put women back in their place where they were in 1980.